Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. I did a video recently where I talked about how there's a major paradigm shift. Well, this is my opinion, but I think the facts on the ground are bearing out my opinion. Some week or so ago that I made a video where I talked about there's a major paradigm shift happening as it pertains to border barriers and just the overall subject of both Thai immigration on one level as well as national security on another. I thought of making this video initially after reading a recent article from the Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com. Article is titled, Thai Army to Erect Temporary 5 km Border Fence. Now, first of all, the word temporary, I always find that word fascinating when used in any kind of government context. Remember, when Nixon closed the gold window, it was temporary. Theoretically, it's still temporary. It could reopen tomorrow. It hasn't in 50 years, but it's temporary. You know, a lot of measures that come in temporarily remain. That's just a phenomenon that you can look back on history in any country and you can see that that happens a fair bit. Now, I'm not bringing that up because I'm necessarily against it. Frankly, I can see many scenarios playing out where, frankly, Thailand is much safer having barrier facilities along the border. So I understand it. That said, just kind of bear that in mind with regard to the word temporary. That said, quoting further from this article, or quoting directly, I should say, the Royal Thai Armed Forces, RTAF, have begun preparing to build the country's first temporary border fence along the Thai-Cambodian border to curb illegal cross-border activities. This follows the National Security Council. So important to point that out. In the interim between me doing the video on the major paradigm shift happening here in Thailand, there was then National Security Council meeting during the meantime between that and this video where we've seen further action on this. And again, this is heavily prioritized. Things often don't move this quickly in bureaucracy, but they're moving fast. And by bureaucratic speed, we're in lightning speed right now. Quoting further, this follows the National Security Council's approval on Thursday for the construction of the fence. Quoting further, Major General Vitai Laithomya, an Armed Forces spokesman, said on Friday that the Development Command, through its Mobile Development Unit 12, is working with the 12th Ranger Regiment to erect the fence near boundary marker 5051 at Bangkok Sabang in Aranya Pratet district of Sakao. So, okay, that's just sort of some general background on what we're talking about with regard to the fence. As I discussed in other videos, there has been a major paradigm shift within immigration circles here in Thailand. As I talked about in the past, there was a paradigm shift somewhere around about 2016-17 where it was especially acute right there, and I use that as sort of a time marker, if you will, because the big evidence for that was the activities of Big Joke, the Surachat Big Joke Hakpan, who became the immigration head at that time, and we started seeing things like crackdowns on documentation pertaining to funds used for retirement visas. There were crackdowns and there were roundups of people and mass, basically, deportations of illegals and people operating illegally here in Thailand during that time period. And as I discussed at the time, there was a paradigm shift within immigration from being much more of an administrative apparatus to a law enforcement apparatus. As I've discussed in other videos, there's a component, especially within the border security component of the immigration apparatus, that is very much national security oriented. And for those who are interested in like deep dive analysis of this stuff, I get into it in our paid news service. If you're interested in getting on the email list to receive long form analysis on this stuff, please feel free to email us, media@integrity-legal.com. While I'm also talking my book, it's worth pointing out, and we'll throw some photos up, my better half and I set up a restaurant here in downtown Bangkok. We have American diner style food and breakfast anytime. It's called Pancake Palace. You can look it up on the internet now and find it, but we also put links in the description below, Google Maps as well as for Grab if you want to get to us. And for those, I've talked to some customers recently who have asked me to point out in a little more detail how to get there. It's between Siloam and Surulong. It's near the mango tree, if you know the mango tree. But it's between Siloam and Surulong. It's about 3 to 5 minute walk from Patpong. So it's actually quite close to the Patpong night market, the Patpong entertainment zone. So if you're interested in coming to see us over at the Pancake Palace, we're near Patpong. You can get to us. Links are in the description below to find us via location apps and via Grab. Now, that said, going back to what we're talking about here, there has been this paradigm shift. And as I discussed in prior videos, it's moved over to a national security, very much a national security focus now in light of recent events this past summer along the border. Quoting further, the fence, expected to be completed within 1 to 2 months, will be a reinforced structure of concrete poles strung with 2 layers of 9-strand barbed wire standing over 2 meters tall, he said. The design of the fence is intended as a, quote, see-through, unquote, barrier rather than a traditional territorial demarcation. That's important, and I'll get back to that here in a moment. Quoting further, closed-circuit cameras will also be installed along the Prompod Canal, a known hotspot for cross-border gambling and scam syndicates. Back to the issue, though, of the see-through barrier. I think this is a really good idea, because what's happening here is, and what you got to understand, there's some nebulousness when it comes to the issue of some, I stress some, of these border areas. And the Thais are being, in my mind, circumspect. People have asked me, what is the Thai attitude? And we'll go ahead and use the thumbnail from the movie Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood, where he's, get off my lawn, you know, and I'll use 2 thumbnails because he says it twice. The main thumbnail I'm going to use for the video itself that you'll see on YouTube is the kind of more hesitant part. I'm going to put a clip to that scene below because I think it does a good job in many ways of distilling into sort of a pop cultural English language nutshell, if you will, the Thai attitude on all of this. Or maybe I should just say my attitude. I'm a convert to Thainess, and I have the fervor of the converted. This is how I sort of feel. But, you know, just talking to regular Thais and friends of mine and things, it's kind of how they feel. In the thumbnail we'll put up here in the video, that's from the first part of the scene where Clint Eastwood comes running out with his firearm to defend his lawn, basically. Get off my lawn. You know, it's his property, and he's coming out and he's very aggressive. That said, there's a part at the end where some people are like, hey, thanks for stepping up or whatever, and he's just like, just get off my lawn. It's kind of it's an almost, I don't want to call it reticent or resigned even, but it's kind of just it's like a sigh. It's like, just get off my lawn. That's how we all feel here in Thailand. Thailand doesn't want anything from anybody. It's one of the reasons I like living here. The Thais just want to be Thai in Thailand, and that's that. Don't come in here trying to change it. Don't come in here trying to do anything to them or us or whoever, whatever you want to look at it as. We just want to be Thai and be left alone. Get off my lawn. That's it. That's really it. And I just think that scene in certain ways kind of sums up the overall thinking process. And look, there's a lot of built up, shall we say, ill feeling at the moment in the aftermath of this past summer because people passed away. There's been loss of life. There's been casualties, both in uniform and out of uniform. I find it deeply troubling myself. That said, I don't think the attitude overall has changed. Thailand doesn't want to start any trouble or escalate any further. That's why I like, again, I'm quoting again, the design of the fence is intended as a quote-unquote see-through barrier rather than a traditional territorial demarcation. Well, that's important because it's probably going to be back from, it's going to be set back a little bit from the area that is the demarcation line, that is the claimed demarcation line. And, you know, I'm really tired of hearing from all these, frankly, idiot foreigners talking about, oh, well, there was an International Court of Justice ruling in 1962. Yeah, over a treaty that was imposed by Imperial France on this area by fiat. You know, stop giving me that's some kind of massively legitimate interpretation that we all have to, you know, venerate. It's nonsense, okay? The Thais and the Khmers are going to work this out. They're going to work it out their own way, in the way that they've always worked things out along that border. I'm very confident the Thais and the Khmers can work it out. Okay? But all this outside nonsense about the history of it and everything, yeah, whose history? That was the thing that hacked me off most when Pei Tongtan, under her term of office, was talking to Macron about the whole thing. You know, frankly, what's France have to do with anything out here? Cambodia and Thailand are independent sovereign nations that border one another. They can work it out. You know, frankly, if anything, the French, you could argue, caused a bunch of this mess, or at least what they left behind has been something that the Khmers and the Thais have had to deal with since then. So I really very much like this method where it's like, look, we're going to step back a couple of feet or whatever from the actual demarcation line and then put up this see-through fence so we can see what's going on up to our demarcation line. I think that's a very reasonable way of handling this, while at the same time making it abundantly clear, get off my lawn. I like it. I think it's a good strategy. I think it's a good way to handle this. I think it's very reasonable. And I think, frankly, it is both affirmatively defensive while at the same time non-escalatory. It's not escalating anything because they're stepped back from the actual line of demarcation, which is the point at which possible conflicts of opinion could arise as to where certain things are. I think it's a very good idea. I think it's a good use of resources. I think it's being judiciously applied and executed. I think overall this is something that will benefit Thailand in the long and short term, I expect. And hopefully we will see a situation where these problems along the border will de-escalate and we can get back to, you know, the traditional peace and harmony that we've known here in Southeast Asia, that tends to prevail, by the way, when we don't have outsiders of any stripe chiming in with their thoughts on how things need to be operating down here. You know, frankly, my kudos to the Thais, my kudos to the folks in the apparatus, if you will, that's in charge of implementing this. I think that this is a good idea. I think it's I think it's thought out with reason, and I think it's being well executed. And I'll certainly be keeping people updated on this channel as the situation evolves.